Day one of free agency definitely had some winners and some losers. Where does Montreal fall in all of that? Well, let's just say at least they're not the Flyers or the Golden Knights. Hi, and welcome back to this week's episode of Habs Hockey Report right here on All Habs Hockey Magazine's YouTube channel, part of Rocket Sports Media. So glad that you're here with us. It's been quite a week since the draft. I'm your host of the show each and every Thursday. My name is Amy Johnson. I'm also the lead correspondent over at ahlreport.com. If you'd like to follow the Laval Rocket, I suggest you bookmark us over there because we bring you all of the AHL coverage of the Habs farm team over there. So glad that you're here. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. If you're a new viewer, take a moment and just hit that subscribe button and notification bell. We're here with you every single Thursday, bringing you the latest on the Montreal Canadiens, the Laval Rocket, Habs prospects, and hearing from you, our fans and viewers. And boy, will there be a lot of that this week. Thanks to all of you who watched our draft quick reaction special that came out last Friday night. If you missed it, we'll have a link for it at the end of the show. But boy, almost 4,000 of you out there watching that one. We're going to get to those reactions of yours later in the show and read you some of the comments that we responded to. Before that, however, we're going to talk about the Montreal Canadiens and what has been going on with them this week. We've had development camp, we've had qualifying offers go out, and now contracts have been signed, and of course free agency has opened. So we're going to break all of that down for you and also get you up to speed on what's been happening on the contract front and free agency front at the AHL level for the Laval Rocket. So lots to talk about. Pretty straightforward feedback forum question. Are you satisfied with how the Canadiens have traversed free agency so far within this first 24 to 48 hours of free agency opening? Are you pleased with what they have or haven't done? And what do you think is the next move that they need to make? Can't wait to hear what you have to say about that. All right, well, in Habs Happenings this week, plenty to talk about. Things actually kicked off right away on Sunday with the opening of the Montreal Canadiens 2022 development camp. Just about 40 players invited to camp, a bit of a smaller size than they've had in past years, which in my opinion was actually advantageous for the Montreal Canadiens. It meant that most of the glaring majority of players who were at development camp this year were actual Habs prospects and draftees going back as far as 2019. So, of course, all of the attention was on Juraj Slafkovsky, but Lane Hutson also making some waves as well, and lots of fun to see there. Rick Stevens and I, Rick Stevens, of course, is our editor-in-chief here at all of our Rocket Sports Media platforms and publications. He's also the co-host of the Canadiens Connection podcast and is my co-host over at the Press Zone podcast. And this week on the Press Zone, Rick and I really kind of analyzed in depth who was at Canadiens development camp, what was going on there, who was injured at development camp, and just kind of a prospect update from that standpoint. So I'm going to recommend that you just check out this side. Just check out this link right here. That'll take you to the latest episode of the Press Zone podcast. The next thing that happened during development camp, however, was Monday was the deadline to tender qualifying offers for pending RFAs. There were 8 pending RFAs in the Canadiens organization. The Montreal Canadiens tendered qualifying offers to 5 of them, letting 3 of them go. The 5 guys who received qualifying offers are, in no particular order, Kirby Dach, Nate Schnarr, Joel Teasdale, and the two goaltenders, Sam Montembeault and Caden Primo. That means they did not qualify Rem Pitlick, Cale Clegg, or Josh Brook. So of the guys that they qualified, there are 3 of the 5 who still have not, as of the time of recording of this show, have not received a contract yet. They've been qualified, but they haven't signed a new contract yet. And that is Kirby Dach and the two goaltenders, Sam Montembeault and Caden Primo. Before even free agency had opened, the day that qualifying offers were due, there were a couple of contracts that were already signed prior to that. Michael Pizzetta being one of them, which was an interesting. This one actually really surprises me. It's a 1-year, one-way NHL contract for Pizzetta. Pez is a popular player. I get it. He's fun to watch. He's feisty. Everybody loves the flow. Everybody loves the personality. And he certainly isn't afraid to drop the mitts with anyone. Perhaps a little too often. Doesn't always choose the right time to drop the gloves and can sometimes put the team in a bit of a precarious position. They did re-sign Corey Schueneman to a 1-year, 2-way NHL contract. Totally on board with this. Corey Schueneman put in the work last year. He didn't look out of place on the times that they needed to recall him to the Montreal Canadiens for him to fill in if there was an injury. He's a great mentor for the younger defensive prospects, of which there will be many for Laval next year. And he's one of those guys. He's got good character. He's good in the room. He's a good leader and mentor towards younger players, and he's very good at what he does, both at the NHL and the AHL level. So a good kind of in-between guy that you can rely on for call-ups. I like this contract a lot. 1-year, 2-way deal for Corey Schueneman. So then that brought us to free agency. The Johnny Gaudreau sweepstakes had to have been the most bonkers thing I think any of us have witnessed in quite a while. First, he was going to re-sign with Calgary. Then he was going to Philly. No, he's going to Jersey. No, Lou's going to get him in the Columbus. Jarmo Kekalainen ends up with him with a big fat contract. Wow. Like, it was bonkers. Vegas continues to I don't even know what. Carolina taking complete advantage and getting Max Pacioretty basically for nothing, for future considerations. You get nothing back from Max Pacioretty. Bizarro world to me. The Philadelphia Flyers, who were a complete disaster last year, have had a week full of controversial decision making, you could say. I mean, they go out, they get Tony DeAngelo, they buy out Oscar Lindblom, cancer survivor, still has just 1 year left on his contract before he goes RFA, fan favorite, good character guy, and you buy him out. Then you don't get Johnny Gaudreau for all of that. And then you bring in Nick Delorier on a 4-year deal. Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine the meltdown going on in Philadelphia right now. Who wouldn't want to be a part of that? So there was certainly lots of entertainment during free agency. It was crickets out of Montreal. Now, Kent Hughes was supposed to meet with the press at the end of the day on a Wednesday. That got postponed and pushed back. And they said, basically, Kent Hughes is still busy. There's still things in the works. We're going to push it back to Thursday. And that's why I say there's a possibility that breaking news might happen on the day today, Thursday, as I tape this, because we're waiting to see what it is that Kent Hughes is going to do. Poof. And through the magic of video production, yes, we do have an update for you. Kent Hughes meeting with the media early this afternoon after really no announcements made earlier in the day today. Basically, the theme of Kent Hughes' presser today was that he's still working on a Jeff Petry trade. He says it's still a priority. However, did make sure to once again reiterate that the only reason that they are trying to move Jeff Petry is because Jeff Petry is requesting it, that otherwise they wouldn't be working on a trade for Jeff Petry at all because they're happy with him as a defenseman. So says that Petry is still a priority, but it's just, and that there were trades for him available on free agency day. But again, coming back to the theme of the move has to be right for Montreal. Kent Hughes is not willing to make any other additions to the trade other than just Jeff Petry needs to be getting something good in return and isn't willing to retain any salary. So he says it could happen this week, it could happen next week, it could happen in a month if it happens at all. He said, but if it doesn't happen, that it's not a right situation for the Montreal Canadiens, that Jeff is going to be back in the lineup come this fall. So something to keep an eye on for sure. Should also mention that he spoke about the other first-round draft selection for this year, Philip Mishar, who also did sign NELC earlier today. So Slafkovsky and Mishar both signing their entry-level deals. Mishar has expressed an interest in playing in North America this year. Kent Hughes not willing to say yet where that's going to be. Could play in Laval, but the Kitchener Rangers hold his rights, so it's very possible that we could see him in the OHL next year, which I think would be a great place for him to get his feet wet with North American hockey and move into some progression with his development that way. Also, Kent Hughes didn't want to make any commitments as to what Slafkovsky will do this fall. He says it's really kind of a week-to-week, day-to-day kind of thing. He believes that Slafkovsky will be coming back to Montreal in early August to train with the development staff, and they'll take it from there and see what happens. So other than that, Paul Byron had to undergo a procedure that he is rehabbing from. It's possible that he won't be ready to start training camp, so that's a bit of a development there. And on the Carey Price front, no real new news. He's slated to have another doctor's appointment in Montreal at the end of this month, and really nothing else to tell there. So not really a lot going on with Kent Hughes or the Montreal Canadiens for this free agency period. And right now it looks like it's just Jeff Petry watch. Of course, nothing said about, any other potential trades, maybe Duran, maybe Dvorak, maybe Gallagher, maybe, Hoffman, Anderson. None of that really came up. So again, we're in a sit and wait holding pattern, but that is the latest coming out of the Montreal Canadiens camp. What did he do? Well, at the NHL, the bulk of what has happened over the course of the past week and on free agency basically all affects more the Laval Rocket than it does the Montreal Canadiens. So I'm going to get to a lot of the contracts that were signed in our next segment when we talk about Laval. But okay, there were a couple of things that did happen that will affect the Canadiens. One thing, they signed Uri Slafkovsky to his 3-year entry-level contract. That was a no-brainer, basically. But they got it done. Which was definitely good to see. We also see, yeah, that's it. That's really the only thing that is going to specifically affect the Montreal Canadiens. I wasn't kidding when I said it was pretty scarce. Now, as far as guys who played on the NHL roster last year, who fans were wondering, will any of these guys come back? Here's who has played on the Canadiens last year who have already signed elsewhere. Laurent Dauphin going back to Arizona on a 1-year, 2-way NHL deal. Some speculated that Brett Kulak would leave Edmonton and come back to Montreal again after that trade. Nope, sorry, I hate to disappoint you. Brett Kulak has re-signed in Edmonton for a 4-year deal at $2.75 per. Also, Cale Clegg has already signed a 1-year, 2-way deal with Buffalo. And just some former Habs news. Mikhail Sergachev getting an 8-year deal for Tampa Bay. Charlie Lindgren finally getting his NHL deal, signing a 3-year and just over $1 million per year with the Washington Capitals. He's going to be backing up Darcy Kemper. That's a tremendous deal for Charlie Lindgren. And Arturi Lehkonen getting re-upped for about 5 years with Colorado, which is tremendous news as well. So certainly lots happening for former Montreal Canadiens, not so much for the current roster. And I think that's where everyone's going to kind of wait and watch with bated breath. You can bet, though, that we will have it all for you. We did say that most of what happened would affect the AHL. So let's not waste any time and check out our Rocket Booster. Well, I'll tell you what, the Laval Rocket roster is already bursting at the seams, and it's not even quite mid-July yet. Exciting in some regards, a little worrying in other regards. What's going to happen for Laval and Habs prospects at the AHL level this year, I think will be really fascinating to watch in terms of the Canadiens organization as a whole and what their new philosophy and direction for player development is going to be. Interestingly enough, most of what has happened for the Montreal Canadiens over the last week and in the opening hours of free agency are mostly moves that are affecting the Laval Rocket. Since we just ended the last segment on former Canadians who have since signed elsewhere in the last week or so, I should get you up to speed on some guys who you won't see in a Laval Rocket sweater come this fall. Some of them are fan favorites, I will say. There's going to need to be a new captain for the Laval Rocket. Xavier Ouellet did tell us at his exit interview at the end of the season that he was not sure what would happen next year, but that he really wanted to try to pursue another shot in the NHL if he could. And so to his credit, it's what he found. He's actually on a 2-year, two-way deal with the Pittsburgh Penguins. As well, on the back end, Toby Paquette-Bisson will not be back in Laval. He has signed a 1-year, two-way deal with the LA Kings, so likely will spend most of his time in the AHL with the Ontario Reign. Louis Belpedio, another defenseman who won't be back. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, all of these defensemen. Well, there's a lot of blue line prospects that are going to be in Laval this fall. And you'll see that the Canadiens have also signed some two-way defenseman deals. So those holes are already filled, trust me. But Louis Belpedio going to the Philadelphia Flyers, so on a one-year two-way deal. So he will mostly spend a good portion of time in Lehigh Valley for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, with the option that they can call him up to the Philadelphia if needed. And Jean-Sebastien D, JSD, not returning to Laval. He has signed reportedly, it hasn't been made official yet, but reportedly a 2-year, two-way deal with the Arizona Coyotes. So quite a change of locale and scenery for Jean-Sebastien D. So what does that leave you? Brendan Gignac signed a 2-year, one-way AHL deal, so he will be back for 2 years. The Laval Rocket also signed Ryan Francis, who is a forward who's played quite a bit of in the queue, signing him to a 1-year, one-way AHL deal. In addition to that, Laval also signed Brennan Saulnier to a 1-year, one-way AHL deal. Brennan Saulnier spent the last couple of years in the Flyers organization playing for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms and also spending some time with their ECHL affiliate in the Reading Royals. As far as NHL contracts, there was a bunch of NHL 1-year, two-way contracts that were signed this week. We mentioned Nate Schnarr at the top of the show. Nate Schnarr was one of those who got a qualifying offer and then got a 1-year, two-way contract from the Montreal Canadiens. Joel Teasdale also got that as well. That was a question for me as to whether or not they would even qualify Joel Teasdale. Yes, he has had setbacks because of a couple of years of dealing with some pretty significant injuries, but still didn't make as much progress this past season as I would have expected. So wasn't sure if they were going to qualify him, but they did. I think this will be kind of a do or die year for Joel Teasdale. He's going to need to make some pretty significant strides in his development if he's going to expect to re-sign again next summer. But they did get him a 1-year, two-way NHL deal. In addition, we mentioned last week, Danik Martel is going to be back for the Laval Rocket, and so will Alex Belzile. He was UFA. He was not under contract. They are bringing him back on a 1-year, two-way NHL deal. I will say outright, I am not thrilled with Martel and Belzile being back. There are a lot of prospects that will need significant ice time, and these are just two guys. Belzile, on one hand, yes, he's got a lot of energy and passion, and he's a great interview. And sure, he can make things happen on the power play, but he is notoriously always responsible for taking a lot of penalties and taking bad penalties. Our friend and colleague Patrick Williams, if you go to ahlreport.com, has an extensive and exhaustive list of all of the free agents available for the AHL or even NHL two-way deals. Head over, you can click this link and go there. It's an extensive list, and it's very well laid out, very easy to read. And when you look through that list, there are just dozens and dozens and dozens of players who could fill the role of an Alex Belzile or Danik Martel with a lot less risk in terms of penalty trouble or not as much offensive production, and more of the reward of better mentors and leadership and better productions. And in addition to that, the Canadiens signed 3 guys during free agency yesterday to 1-year two-way deals. They got Madison Bowie, who's a defenseman. He's on a 1-year two-way deal. It's hopeful. It's kind of like another Kirby Dach situation where you're hoping that maybe he'll be able, in a new organization and in Montreal, be able to kind of rekindle some of the things that made him a pretty enticing prospect a few years ago. So that's going to be a wait and see, but Madison Bowie likely headed for the AHL with Ouellet and Belpedio both moving on. He could be a good replacement of that type of player on the back end for the Laval Rocket, and someone maybe to help the prospects a little bit there as well. In addition to that, the Canadiens also signed 1-year two-way deals to 2 forwards, Anthony Richard and Mitchell Stevens. Again, these are guys who will likely spend the bulk of the season in Laval with call-up potential if injuries arise, and both good, experienced AHL hockey players who will add a bit of that veteran presence and a little bit of a scoring touch to the Laval Rocket. I have to agree with my teammate and colleague, Michael Spinella, who said yesterday that he certainly is happier with the Madison Bowie, Mitchell Stevens, Anthony Richard signings than the Danik Martel, Alex Belzile signings. And I gotta say, I'm 100% with you on there. The signings for Laval that took place on free agency day are much more in line with what you'd like to see for the Rocket moving forward. So we'll have to wait to see what happens with those guys. Laval is going to be pretty fun to watch this fall. Mostly because it's going to be a lot of prospects that we're going to be able to watch develop and progress, and some of them we're going to get to see kind of for the first time in North America, that type of thing. It's going to be a very different type of team than fans saw last year. That's the one thing you need to remember. This is not going to be the same kind of team that you saw last year that went all the way to the Eastern Conference Final. Not saying that they don't have the potential to make the playoffs or go deep, but it's just there's going to be a shift in focus, and there's definitely going to be a big turnover in personnel, and that's normal in the AHL. AHL rosters tend to get completely overturned, all but for a few steady presences each year, and that's to be expected with new prospects coming in. So can't wait to see what happens. Last but certainly not least this week is the Habs Fan Hub, where we get to hear from you, our viewers. We love that you drop comments down below on each video, giving your thoughts about a variety of things. But for us, it needs to go a step further than that. We need to be able to make your voices a little more heard and amplify Habs fans' voices. And so every week, we bring you a feedback forum question. The following week, we read some of your answers and discuss them. And also, don't forget, the All Habs mailbag is always open here at Habs Hockey Report. If you have a question about a player, a prospect, the Canadiens, the Laval Rocket, Habs prospects in general, development camp, training camp, whatever the case may be. So drop that question in the comments section down below, and I will be happy to answer it on an upcoming episode of the show. So as far as the feedback forum question goes, again, remember, we ask you a question every week. We invite you to think about it and answer it in the comments section. And then the following week, we read some of your responses here on the show and talk about them. And it's a way to just amplify fans' voices. You guys deserve to be heard. We appreciate all the comments that you leave for us, but we want to go one step further and make your voices heard to everyone watching as well. So this week's question, remember, now that free agency, I don't want to say has come and gone because it's now kind of an ongoing thing throughout the summer, but now that the frenzy part of free agency has settled down, how do you feel about what Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens did or didn't do this past week between the draft and free agency? Would you have liked to have seen a trade for Petry already happen? Would you like to see other guys traded out? Was there a free agent that you were hoping they were going to go after, or are you happy with the kind of quiet free agency that the Canadiens have had so far? Can't wait to hear what you have to say about that. But let's look back at last week. For those of you who did catch that Friday night special reaction episode after the NHL draft, thank you to all of the new subscribers, all of the viewers. We just had such a tremendous outpouring from all of you, and it was just it was really fun and exciting to watch that unfold throughout the week. We've had dozens and dozens of responses to the questions, so we're not going to be able to read them all, but I did take kind of a good sampling of all ends of the spectrum. And we're going to start with a couple of fans who maybe perhaps weren't super excited about how the Canadiens did in the 2022 NHL draft. We start with Darcy, who says, the trading of Romanov, who was progressing in a way you would hope, and getting back an underachieving Kirby Dach really surprised me. I think that might come back to haunt Gorton and Hughes. For now, we lost that transaction. The Slafkovsky deal was a play now, while Wright should play another year with Kingston situation. Patience is a virtue. For now, we lost that deal also. The analytics for Wright off the charts, for Slafkovsky not so much, no contest. Time will tell, but for now we screwed up again, drafting the wrong player for the wrong reason. And I can certainly sympathize with those feelings. You always want to know that, you always want to feel confident that drafting decisions or decisions about roster and personnel are made for hockey reasons and for the right reasons. And anytime that you feel like maybe that wasn't completely lived up to, it leaves you feeling a little empty or maybe wanting a little bit more. So only time will tell who is going to end up being the better choice, Slafkovsky or Shane Wright, but it'll be fun to watch it progress, that's for sure. Dave also chimed in and said, I knew the Habs wanted to make a splash, but what happened had me stunned. Whatever happens in the future for Slafkovsky, I give Bobroff and Lapointe, and specifically Gorton and Hughes, a lot of credit for having the pucks to go against what fans and some NHL experts thought was the consensus or smart choice. After processing everything, I'm looking forward to seeing this new Habs generation with Slafkovsky and Dach, two highly skilled and physically big players, something Montreal fans haven't seen in a very long time, if ever. As for the other picks, I'm pleased with them, but extremely disappointed in yet another lack of homegrown player selections, see Anaheim picks. I was surprised by the lack of player trades to try to clear up cap space, so I expect a super quiet free agent period. And Dave, you were definitely spot on about that. It has been quiet because of those lack of trades, which you would have thought it would have behooved Kent Hughes to have gotten some of these trades done prior to the draft, even, so that coming into the week before free agency, you had an idea of what you had to work with, maybe some cap space. It's going to be, it's the off season is always kind of take some decisions, leave others. Some things are going to go great. Some things are not going to go according to plan. And all fans can do is sit and just kind of wait and hope that everything works out. We have a kind of middle of the road, both sides of the argument response here from James Snedden, who's a longtime reader and listener viewer, listener, and reader here at Rocket Sports. Says, going into Thursday, I expected the Habs to take Shane Wright, but I'm not disappointed that they selected Juraj Slafkovsky. Habs need more size with skill up front. He's going to be a load for opposing D to handle. Like a lot of fans, I have mixed emotions over the Romanov trade. I saw him making strides. I know we have lots of left-handed defenseman prospects, so perhaps that played into the trade. The trade for Dach seems like a swing for the fences. Perhaps a fresh start with the Habs will see him develop into a 2C. Great if it does. Would be an asset to have size and skill down the middle, but he's far from a finished project and has lots to improve in his game. Hope the injury bug is behind him as well and can stay healthy. I agree with you on all of those points there, Jim. In terms of the other picks, they're all projects. I'm interested in seeing how the Habs develop their prospects going forward. And we just talked about this in the previous segment. I'm with you there on that one. It'll be key going forward. Yes, that's true. I share your concern about drafting undersized players. You can have a few on your roster, but not a roster full. Demanding physically to go deep in the playoffs. Teams that win have size with skill. That said, I'll give Hughes and Gorton the benefit of the doubt. I know they spent a lot of time evaluating these players and how they project 2 to 3 years down the development curve. And always so well said, always so well thought out. Thank you, James, for your comment. The overwhelming majority, however, of the responses that we got were absolutely enthusiastic about what the Habs did in the draft last week, and it really seems to have there's a new energy with Habs fans. They seem to be very hopeful. They seem to be invigorated, and they seem to be really excited about what's ahead. JG Johnny says, I agree. I think Slaff's attitude and confidence played a huge role, and they thought he could take the pressure of Montreal hockey better than anyone else. So many young players cracked to it here, and that's, thank you for that comment, because it's true. Maybe a little bit more weight was put on Slafkovsky's personality. We see he has a big personality. He's full of quotable moments. And seems to also have the type of confidence that can kind of take on the microscope of the Montreal media and fan base and the pressures that come along with that. It is certainly a factor that plays into anyone who comes to play in Montreal. And so maybe that did play a little bit more into Kent Hughes' decision. Daryl says Romanov has little offensive upside. A likable lad who could hit, but he was often out of position. Like PK, Habs fans grossly overestimate him. Suckers for style over substance. Well, Daryl, I certainly appreciate your thoughts there. I'm not even going to touch the PK Subban trade. I agree with you. His popularity, mostly through his personality, was really what drove decisions around PK Subban. Unfortunately, not so much what he could do on the ice. And I just, it's kind of bygones be bygones with that. I don't like to, however, put Romanov in the same boat as PK Subban because they're completely different people, completely different styles of players, completely different personalities, and completely at different points in their development and career. Romanov was one of the few players who actually showed improvements this year, all year this past season, even under Ducharme, had some really positive moments this past year. And sure, are there going to be moments where maybe, he was out of position, or maybe he wasn't, he was missing passes, or maybe, just things that were mistakes. Well, that's to be expected at his stage of the game. He is still learning and developing, and I'm okay with those kinds of mistakes being made. I'm not looking for someone his age to be perfect yet. So I do appreciate the passion and the response. I just don't want to, I hesitate to compare those two defensemen. Randy says, Hughes has a plan and it looks like he wants big, skilled, highly motivated workhorses. He stayed the course and we'll see if it works. Well, Randy, you certainly sound very excited. We're glad to hear that you're really enjoying what's going on this off season. Big, yes. But not as far as the rest of the draft. May have been the case for Uri Slafkovsky, but not the rest of Kent Hughes' draft. So that theme didn't follow through. The other things, skilled, highly motivated workhorses, absolutely, we can see that. But size definitely didn't play a factor throughout the rest of the draft. We'll have to see if that comes back to bite the Canadiens down the road or not. But for now, we can hope that the skill portion of their games makes up for a lack of size. And finally, we have DS who says, I think Montreal knocked it out of the park on their draft, drafted for huge upside with their picks. I think size isn't going to be such a big issue. That was the Bergevin era, and look how the defense turned out. No puck-moving defensemen, they were big pylons on ice. The teams we need to draft like are Colorado, who have high speed, skill, size is secondary. And I appreciate your comment as well. Certainly can agree you don't want to swing as hard towards size as Bergevin did. There were obvious, the game has changed in the last 10 years to a more skill game. And although size can be secondary, it is still just as important. Teams like Colorado may focus on skill and speed and size being secondary, but they still need that size. And in order to make it deep into a Stanley Cup playoff run, you have to have a good amount of size on your roster in addition to the skill and speed. So although size shouldn't be the priority, you also can't discount it or ignore it either. Otherwise, you won't be able to keep up with teams who have skill and size on their roster. But we appreciate everyone's comments. We had so many responses last week. We love to have that kind of interaction with all of our viewers. And if you happen to miss that very popular NHL draft reaction video, you can check it out right here. And I'll see you back here next Thursday for Habs Hockey Report.